My name is Sage Whitmore, and I am 28 years old. Last Tuesday, I discovered something that shattered everything I believed about family loyalty. Standing in my childhood bedroom, holding a dusty shoebox filled with adoption papers I was never supposed to find, I realized my parents had been lying to me for nearly 3 decades. The golden child they always favored over me? She was not even their biological daughter. But here is the twist that will shock you: neither was I. Before we dive into this family revenge story that will leave you questioning everything about blood versus chosen family, let me know where you are watching from. If this hook already has your heart racing about what comes next, smash that like button and hit subscribe, because this tale of family secrets and ultimate justice is about to get wild. Trust me, you will want to see how this sister favoritism backfires spectacularly. Growing up, I always knew something felt off about my place in the Whitmore family hierarchy. My sister Celestine, just 2 years younger than me, could do absolutely no wrong in our parents' eyes. When she crashed their car at 17, they bought her a newer one. When I got a small scratch on the family minivan at 19, I had to work extra shifts at my part-time job to pay for the repair. The pattern was so consistent that I stopped questioning it and started accepting that some children are simply born less lovable than others. After college, I moved across the country to Portland while Celestine stayed close to home in Ohio. She became a social media influencer with barely 10,000 followers, but our parents treated her like she had discovered the cure for cancer. They funded her lifestyle, paid her rent, and constantly shared her mediocre content on their Facebook pages. Meanwhile, I had built a successful career as a software engineer, bought my own house, and managed my finances independently. Yet somehow, I remained the disappointing daughter who never called enough or visited often enough. The discovery happened during what was supposed to be a routine trip home for Thanksgiving. I had arrived 2 days early to help with preparations, something Celestine never bothered to do. While cleaning out the attic to make room for holiday decorations, I knocked over an old cardboard box tucked behind some Christmas lights. Documents spilled across the dusty floor, and among them, I found 2 sets of adoption papers. My hands trembled as I read through the legal documents. Sage Marie Thompson, born March 15, 1995, adopted by Robert and Linda Whitmore on June 20, 1995. Then came the second set. Celestine Rose Davis, born January 8, 1997, adopted by Robert and Linda Whitmore on March 10, 1997. Both of us were adopted. Both of us had come from different biological families. Yet our parents had chosen to tell neither of us this fundamental truth about our origins. But the real shock came when I found a third document, a family court record showing that my adoption had been finalized first. I was not just adopted. I had been their first choice, their first daughter, the child they had specifically selected and brought home before they ever knew Celestine existed. The irony was devastating. For 28 years, I had watched my parents shower Celestine with the kind of unconditional love and support I desperately craved. I had convinced myself that something was inherently wrong with me, that I possessed some fundamental flaw that made me less worthy of their affection. Now I understood that their favoritism had nothing to do with biology, personality, or worthiness. They had simply chosen to love one adopted daughter more than the other. But there was more. Hidden beneath the adoption papers, I found a series of letters from my biological mother. She had been writing to me every year on my birthday, sending updates about her life and expressing her hope that someday we might meet. Every single letter had been intercepted by my adoptive parents and hidden away. 43 letters spanning from my first birthday to my 28th, each one filled with love, regret, and longing from a woman who had never stopped thinking about the daughter she had given up. The letters revealed that my biological mother, Sarah Thompson, had been 16 when she became pregnant with me. She came from a religious family that pressured her to give me up for adoption, but she had never wanted to lose contact entirely. The adoption agency had promised that the Whitmores would facilitate communication between us when I became an adult. Instead, they had chosen to pretend these letters never existed. Reading through Sarah's words, I learned that I had inherited her love of technology and problem-solving. She had become a computer programmer herself, inspired by wondering what talents her daughter might possess. She had even started a small scholarship fund for young women pursuing careers in STEM fields, naming it in honor of the daughter she hoped was thriving somewhere in the world. Meanwhile, Celestine knew nothing about any of this. She had been living her entire life believing she was the biological golden child, the daughter who truly belonged, while I was the adopted outsider who never quite measured up. The reality was that we were both outsiders, but our parents had arbitrarily decided that one of us deserved their full love and support while the other deserved only criticism and emotional scraps. Sitting in that dusty attic, surrounded by evidence of decades of deception, I felt a cold clarity wash over me. This was not about sibling rivalry or personality conflicts. This was about deliberate emotional abuse disguised as family dynamics. My parents had actively chosen to create a hierarchy where one daughter thrived while the other struggled, all while hiding the truth that would have explained everything. I carefully photographed every document with my phone, making sure to capture clear images of the adoption papers, court records, and each of my biological mother's letters. Then I returned everything to the box exactly as I had found it. My parents and Celestine had no idea that their carefully constructed lies were about to crumble. For the first time in my adult life, I felt something more powerful than sadness or resignation about my place in this family. I felt anger. Pure, righteous anger at the people who had stolen 28 years of authentic relationships from me. They had robbed me of the chance to know my biological mother, and they had robbed her of the chance to know me. They had forced me to question my worth and value as a human being, all while presenting themselves as loving parents who were simply responding to natural family dynamics. As I climbed down from the attic, I began forming a plan. They wanted to play favorites with their adopted daughters? They wanted to hide life-changing information and manipulate family relationships? Fine. But they were about to learn that the daughter they had underestimated for nearly 3 decades was far more strategic and resourceful than they had ever imagined. The game was about to change, and this time I would be the one writing the rules. The Thanksgiving dinner that followed my discovery was surreal. I sat at the family table, cutting turkey and making small talk about my job, all while my parents and Celestine remained completely unaware that I now possessed the truth they had spent decades hiding. My mother fussed over Celestine's latest Instagram collaboration, praising her for landing a partnership with a small skincare company. My father nodded along enthusiastically, asking detailed questions about her follower engagement and brand strategy. When the conversation turned to me, their tone shifted to polite obligation. They asked about my work in the same way people inquire about the weather, expecting brief, unremarkable answers. I had just received a promotion to senior software engineer and was leading a team developing security protocols for a major tech company, but their eyes glazed over whenever I mentioned technical details. Celestine openly scrolled through her phone while I spoke, and our parents made no effort to redirect her attention or show genuine interest in my accomplishments. The contrast was so stark that I marveled at how I had normalized this treatment for so many years. I had been conditioned to accept scraps of attention and call it family love. Meanwhile, Celestine basked in their undivided focus, completely unaware that she was not the biological princess she believed herself to be. That night, I lay in my childhood bedroom, staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars I had stuck to the ceiling in middle school. I thought about Sarah Thompson, my biological mother, spending 28 years wondering if her daughter was happy, successful, or even alive. I thought about the scholarship fund she had created in my honor, hoping that somewhere in the world, the child she had given up was pursuing her dreams in technology. The cruel irony was that I had achieved exactly what she hoped for, but she had no way of knowing because my adoptive parents had stolen every opportunity for connection. I thought about Celestine, who had built her entire identity around being the favored biological daughter. Her confidence, her entitlement, her casual dismissal of my achievements, all of it was rooted in the belief that she occupied a special place in our family hierarchy that I could never challenge. What would happen to that confidence when she learned that her elevated status was completely arbitrary? But mostly, I thought about my parents and the calculated cruelty of their choices. They had not simply withheld information, they had actively created a toxic family dynamic that pitted their daughters against each other. They had watched me struggle with feelings of inadequacy and unworthiness for nearly 3 decades, never once considering that their favoritism might be damaging my mental health and self-esteem. By morning, I had decided on my approach. I would not confront them immediately or dramatically. Instead, I would gather more information, document everything, and plan a revelation that would force them to face the full consequences of their deception. They had played a long game of emotional manipulation, I would play a longer game of strategic exposure. I spent the next 2 weeks conducting research from Portland. Using the information from my biological mother's letters, I was able to locate Sarah Thompson through social media. She was living in Denver, working as a senior developer for a renewable energy company. Her LinkedIn profile showed an impressive career trajectory, and her personal Facebook page revealed a woman who had built a fulfilling life while never forgetting the daughter she had given up. I also researched the adoption agency that had facilitated both adoptions. Several online reviews mentioned concerns about their communication practices with biological parents, suggesting that my parents' decision to hide Sarah's letters was part of a pattern rather than an isolated incident. This information would be crucial if legal action became necessary. Meanwhile, I began documenting my parents' ongoing favoritism in real time. I created a detailed spreadsheet tracking their social media interactions, financial support, and emotional investment in each daughter. The data was damning. In the past year alone, they had publicly celebrated 17 of Celestine's minor accomplishments while acknowledging only 3 of mine. They had provided her with over $8,000 in direct financial support while contributing nothing to my life except criticism about my life choices. I also started reaching out to extended family members and family friends, ostensibly to reconnect but actually to gauge their perceptions of our family dynamics. The responses were illuminating. Multiple relatives had noticed the favoritism over the years but had assumed it was based on personality differences or birth order dynamics. None of them knew that both Celestine and I were adopted, which meant our parents had been lying to their entire social network for nearly 3 decades. The most revealing conversation was with my Aunt Rebecca, my father's sister, who had always been fond of me despite my parents' treatment. When I carefully broached the subject of family dynamics, she admitted that she had often wondered why my parents seemed so much more invested in Celestine's success than mine. I always thought it was strange, Rebecca confided during a phone call. You were such a bright, accomplished child, but they acted like Celestine's mediocre achievements were miraculous while your genuine successes were just expected. I mentioned it to your mother once, and she got very defensive. Said I did not understand the complexities of raising different personality types. This conversation confirmed that the favoritism had been obvious to outside observers for years. My parents had not been subtle about their preferences, they had simply been confident that no one would challenge them or dig deeper into their motivations. As I gathered evidence and planned my next moves, I also began the process of reaching out to Sarah Thompson. I created a new email address and spent hours crafting a message that would convey the complexity of our situation without overwhelming her. I wanted her to know that I had found her letters, that I had never stopped existing, and that I was interested in building a relationship if she was open to it. Her response came within hours, filled with joy, tears, and 28 years of suppressed maternal love. She had never remarried or had other children, dedicating her life to her career and to hoping that someday she might reconnect with the daughter she had never forgotten. She shared photos of herself throughout the years, and I could see my own features reflected in her face. We had the same smile, the same thoughtful expression, even the same habit of tilting our heads when concentrating. As Sarah and I began building a relationship through daily emails and video calls, I felt a sense of belonging that I had never experienced with my adoptive family. She was genuinely interested in my work, proud of my accomplishments, and fascinated by the person I had become. For the first time in my life, I understood what it felt like to be truly seen and valued by a parent figure. This connection strengthened my resolve to expose the truth about my adoptive family's deception. They had stolen nearly 3 decades of this relationship from both Sarah and me. Now it was time for them to face the consequences of their choices. 3 weeks after Thanksgiving, Celestine called me in tears. Our parents had surprised her with the news that they were scaling back their financial support because she needed to become more independent. They had given her 6 months to find sustainable income sources and would no longer be covering her rent, car payment, or credit card bills. For someone who had never been denied anything, this sudden shift felt like the end of the world. "I do not understand why they are being so harsh," she sobbed into the phone. "I am working so hard on building my brand, but influencer income is unpredictable. They know I need time to establish myself. Why are they suddenly acting like I am some kind of burden?" I listened to her complaints with newfound perspective. This was the first time in our lives that Celestine was experiencing even a fraction of the emotional distance and conditional support that had defined my entire relationship with our parents. The irony was not lost on me that she was calling the sister she had always dismissed, seeking comfort for treatment that was still far more generous than anything I had ever received. But instead of feeling vindicated by her distress, I felt a complicated mixture of sympathy and strategic opportunity. Celestine was not the true villain in this story, she was another victim of our parents' manipulative parenting choices. She had been conditioned to expect unconditional support and had never learned to question why that support was not extended equally to her sister. Now that her privileged position was threatened, she was finally experiencing the insecurity and confusion that had shaped my entire childhood. I chose my words carefully. "That does sound really stressful, Celestine. Have you ever wondered why they made different choices for us over the years? Like, do you remember them being this involved in monitoring my financial independence when I was your age?" There was a long pause. "I mean, you were always more self-sufficient," she said slowly. "You never needed as much help as I do." "Or maybe I never received as much help as you do," I suggested gently. "Do you think it is possible that they had different expectations for us that were not really based on our actual needs or capabilities?" This conversation marked the beginning of a careful campaign to help Celestine recognize the inequitable treatment that had defined our family dynamics. I was not ready to reveal the full truth about our adoptions yet, but I could start planting seeds of awareness about the favoritism that had shaped our relationship. Over the following weeks, I continued building my relationship with Sarah while simultaneously documenting my parents' behavior and gradually opening Celestine's eyes to their patterns of manipulation. Sarah and I had progressed to weekly video calls, and she had begun sharing stories about my early childhood that my adoptive parents had never mentioned. According to the adoption records, I had been a healthy, happy baby who adapted quickly to new environments and showed early signs of curiosity and intelligence. "The social worker told me you were exceptionally alert for your age," Sarah shared during one of our calls. "She said you seemed to absorb everything around you and respond to new people with interest rather than fear. I used to wonder if that curiosity would translate into academic success or creative pursuits as you grew up." These conversations helped me understand that the narrative I had internalized about being a difficult or less lovable child was completely fabricated. I had been given up for adoption due to my biological mother's circumstances, not because of any inherent flaws in my personality or potential. Meanwhile, my research into the adoption agency had yielded disturbing information. I discovered that the organization had lost its license in 2010 due to ethical violations related to communication between adoptive and biological families. Multiple families had filed complaints about intercepted letters, hidden contact attempts, and misleading information about biological parents' wishes for ongoing relationships. This discovery led me to contact a lawyer who specialized in adoption law. During our consultation, she explained that while my parents had not technically violated any laws by hiding Sarah's letters, their actions had violated the spirit of the adoption agreement and could potentially be grounds for legal action if Sarah chose to pursue it. More importantly, the lawyer helped me understand that I had every right to access my adoption records and connect with my biological family, regardless of my adoptive parents' preferences. Armed with this legal validation, I began planning the confrontation that would expose the truth to my entire family. But first, I needed to ensure that Celestine would be prepared for the revelation about her own adoption. Despite our complicated history, I did not want her to be blindsided by information that would fundamentally change her understanding of her identity and place in our family. I started by sharing some of my own struggles with feeling like an outsider in our family. During one of our phone conversations, I told Celestine about the years I had spent questioning why our parents seemed so much more invested in her success than mine. I described the impact their favoritism had on my self-esteem and my relationships with them. "I never realized you felt that way," Celestine admitted. "I just thought you were more independent and did not need as much validation. But now that you mention it, I can see how their reactions to our achievements have been really different." This acknowledgement was significant progress. For the first time, Celestine was recognizing that our parents' treatment of us had been inequitable rather than simply responsive to our different personalities. I also began preparing Sarah for the possibility of meeting Celestine and potentially confronting our adoptive parents about their deception. She was nervous about the prospect of conflict but determined to support whatever decisions I made about how to handle the situation. "I have spent 28 years wondering if you were happy and healthy," Sarah told me. "If your adoptive parents prevented us from having a relationship because they thought it was better for you, I could eventually forgive that. But if they prevented it for their own convenience or control, then I think you have every right to hold them accountable." As Christmas approached, my parents began their usual pattern of lavish gift-giving for Celestine while expressing concern about my financial responsibility and suggesting that I was too old for expensive presents. This year, however, I saw their behavior through the lens of what I now knew about our family's true history. They were not just playing favorites, they were actively maintaining a lie that had shaped our entire family structure. I decided that Christmas Day would be the perfect time for my revelation. The whole family would be together, the atmosphere would initially be celebratory, and the contrast between their public image as loving parents and the reality of their deceptive behavior would be stark. I began planning exactly how I would present the evidence I had gathered and what I hoped to accomplish through the confrontation. The goal was not just to expose their lies but to force them to acknowledge the damage their choices had inflicted on both their daughters and on Sarah. I wanted them to understand that their favoritism had been cruel and arbitrary, that their decision to hide our adoptions had been selfish and harmful, and that their treatment of me had been emotionally abusive regardless of their intentions. But I also wanted to give them an opportunity to take responsibility for their actions and potentially repair some of the damage they had caused. Despite everything they had done, they were still the only parents I had known for 28 years. If they could acknowledge their mistakes and commit to changing their behavior, there might be a path forward for our relationship. However, I was also prepared for the possibility that they would refuse to take responsibility or would attempt to justify their actions. In that case, I was ready to cut ties completely and build my future around the relationships that actually valued and supported me. The stage was set for a confrontation that would either transform our family dynamics or end them entirely. Christmas morning arrived with the usual fanfare of expensive gifts piled under the tree for Celestine while my single-wrapped present sat modestly to the side. I had spent weeks preparing for this moment, and my heart raced as I watched my parents fuss over Celestine's reactions to her new designer handbag, professional camera equipment, and jewelry set worth more than my monthly salary. When my turn came, I unwrapped a generic gift card to a bookstore with a note suggesting I needed to read more personal development materials. The casual cruelty of it, especially knowing what I now knew, crystallized my resolve. "Actually, before we continue," I said, standing up and walking to my bag, "I have some gifts of my own to share." I pulled out 3 manila envelopes, each labeled with a family member's name. "These contain some very special documents that I think will interest everyone." My mother looked puzzled. "Sage, honey, we already exchanged gifts. What is this about?" I handed Celestine her envelope first. "Open it," I said simply. She tore it open and pulled out copies of her adoption papers. Her face went white as she read her birth name, Celestine Rose Davis. "What is this supposed to be?" she whispered, but I could see the recognition dawning in her eyes. "Those are your adoption records," I said calmly. "The same adoption records that Mom and Dad have been hiding from both of us for our entire lives." I handed my parents their envelope, which contained copies of both our adoption papers plus several of Sarah's intercepted letters. My father's hand shook as he opened the envelope. My mother gasped audibly when she saw the documents spill out. "Now Celestine," I continued, turning back to my sister, "before you start wondering why they chose to tell you that you were their biological daughter while treating me like an unwanted houseguest, you should know that I was actually adopted first. 2 years before you. Which means all those years of watching them treat you like precious royalty while treating me like a burden. That was a choice. An arbitrary, cruel choice that had nothing to do with biology or birth order or personality differences." Celestine was staring at the adoption papers, tears streaming down her face. "I do not understand. Mom, Dad, is this real?" My mother found her voice first. "Sage, how dare you ambush us like this on Christmas Day? These are private family matters that should be discussed." "Privately?" I interrupted. "Like how you privately decided to intercept 28 years of letters from my biological mother? Like how you privately chose to let me believe I was fundamentally flawed while letting Celestine believe she was genetically superior? Which parts of your deception should have remained private exactly?" I opened my own envelope and pulled out copies of Sarah's letters. "This is Sarah Thompson, my biological mother. She has been writing to me every year on my birthday since I turned 1 year old. 43 letters expressing her love, sharing her life updates, and hoping that someday we might meet. You stole every single one of them." I read excerpts from several letters aloud, my voice steady despite the emotion building in my chest. "Here's what she wrote on my 18th birthday. I hope wherever you are, you know that giving you up was the hardest decision I ever made. I think about you every day and wonder what kind of person you have become. I started a scholarship fund for young women in technology because I like to imagine you might be interested in science or computers." My father was staring at the floor, unable to meet my eyes. My mother had gone completely silent, her face flushed with a mixture of guilt and defensiveness. "The beautiful irony," I continued, "is that Sarah was right. I did become interested in technology. I built the exact career she imagined for me, and she has been celebrating hypothetical daughters through her scholarship fund while you convinced me that my real achievements were not worth celebrating." Celestine finally spoke, her voice barely audible. "They told me I was special because I was their real daughter. They told me you were just different, that you did not need as much attention because you were more independent. They told you that," I agreed, because it was easier than explaining that they had decided to play favorites with their adopted daughters. It was easier than admitting that their preferential treatment was completely arbitrary and psychologically damaging. My mother finally exploded. "We did what we thought was best for both of you. Celestine needed more support, and you were always so self-sufficient. We were responding to your different personalities. Stop lying," I shouted, surprising myself with the force of my own voice. "You created our different personalities by treating us differently from birth. You taught Celestine to expect unconditional support and taught me to expect conditional scraps. You made her confident and entitled while making me insecure and desperate for approval. And you did it all while hiding the truth that would have explained everything." I pulled out my phone and showed them screenshots of my correspondence with Sarah. "I found her 3 weeks ago. We have been talking every day since then. Do you want to know what she told me about the adoption agreement? The agency promised her that you would facilitate contact when I became an adult. Instead, you turned me into a stranger to my own biological mother while letting me believe that something was wrong with me." The room was completely silent except for Celestine's quiet crying. My father looked like he had aged 10 years in the past 10 minutes. Here's what is going to happen, I said, my voice calm but firm. First, you are going to apologize to both Celestine and me for lying about our origins and for creating a toxic family hierarchy based on arbitrary favoritism. Second, you are going to apologize to Sarah for stealing 28 years of relationship with her daughter. And third, you are going to explain to your entire extended family and social network that both of your daughters are adopted, because I am done pretending that your lies are family secrets worth protecting. My mother stood up abruptly. You cannot force us to. Actually, I interrupted, I can. Because I have documented everything. Every social media post showing your favoritism, every financial transaction proving your unequal support, every family gathering where you treated Celestine like a princess and me like an afterthought. I have legal documentation of your violation of the adoption agreement, and I have witnesses who noticed your differential treatment over the years. I looked directly at both my parents. You spent nearly 3 decades teaching me that I was not worth your full love and attention. You convinced me that I was fundamentally less valuable than my sister. And you did it all while knowing that our family hierarchy was built on lies. That was not parenting. That was psychological abuse disguised as family dynamics. The truth was finally out, hanging in the air like smoke after an explosion. Everything they had built, every lie they had maintained, every justification they had constructed for their behavior, all of it was crumbling in real time. And for the first time in my adult life, I felt truly free. The silence that followed my revelation stretched for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. My father sat slumped in his chair, staring at the adoption papers as if they might spontaneously combust. My mother stood frozen by the Christmas tree, her mouth opening and closing like she was trying to form words that would not come. Celestine had curled up on the couch, still clutching her adoption papers and crying quietly. Finally, my father spoke. Sage, we never meant for things to turn out this way. We thought we were doing what was best. For who? I demanded. Best for Celestine, who built her entire identity on being the favored biological daughter. Best for me, who spent 28 years believing I was inherently less lovable. Or best for you too, who got to play happy family while avoiding difficult conversations about adoption and family dynamics. My mother found her voice, but it came out as a defensive hiss. We gave you everything you needed. A good home, education, opportunities. You gave me conditional love based on arbitrary preferences while giving Celestine unconditional support, I corrected. And you stole my relationship with Sarah, who has spent nearly 3 decades wondering if her daughter was dead or alive. Celestine looked up from the couch, her face blotchy and confused. I do not understand any of this. If we are both adopted, why did you treat us so differently? Why did you lie to us? My parents exchanged glances, and I could see them silently debating how much truth they were willing to admit. My mother spoke first, her voice careful and measured. When we adopted you, Sage, we thought you would be our only child. But when the opportunity came to adopt Celestine, we felt called to expand our family. You were older, more independent, and Celestine was so young and needed more attention. She was 2 years old, I interrupted. I was 4. We were both babies who needed equal amounts of love and attention. The difference is that you chose to give her more. My father tried a different approach. You have to understand, the adoption process was different then. We did not have the same resources or guidance about maintaining relationships with biological families. That is also a lie, I said, pulling out printed emails from my correspondence with the adoption lawyer. I spoke with an attorney who specializes in adoption law. The agency explicitly told you that Sarah wanted ongoing contact and made you agree to facilitate communication when I became an adult. You chose to violate that agreement. I watched my parents realize that I had done my homework, that this was not an emotional outburst but a calculated confrontation backed by evidence and legal consultation. The power dynamic in our family had shifted permanently. Celestine stood up suddenly, her adoption papers still in her hand. I need to know about my biological parents. If Sage found her birth mother, I want to find mine too. My mother looked panicked. Celestine, honey, that might not be a good idea. Some situations are complicated. More complicated than finding out on Christmas morning that my entire life has been built on lies? Celestine snapped, and I felt a surge of pride at her newfound backbone. I want to see my adoption file. I want to know why my biological parents gave me up. And I want to understand why you two decided to love me more than you loved Sage when we were both equally adopted. This was the moment I had been hoping for. Celestine was not just processing the information about her own adoption, she was recognizing the injustice of how our parents had treated us differently. The golden child facade was cracking, and underneath it, she was discovering her own capacity for critical thinking and moral outrage. My phone buzzed with a text message from Sarah, thinking of you today. However your family responds to the truth, remember that you are loved and valued exactly as you are. I showed the message to Celestine. This is from my biological mother. We have been building a relationship for the past 3 weeks. She is proud of who I have become, interested in my career, and grateful for every day we get to reconnect. For the first time in my life, I understand what it feels like to be genuinely valued by a parent figure. The contrast was stark and deliberate. While our adoptive parents sat in stunned silence, processing the consequences of their exposed lies, I had evidence of a healthy, supportive relationship with someone who actually wanted to know and celebrate the real me. My mother finally broke down completely. We never meant for you to feel unloved, Sage. We thought you were stronger, more capable of handling independence. You taught me to be independent by withholding support, I corrected. And you taught Celestine to be dependent by providing too much. Neither of those approaches was healthy parenting. They were just different forms of emotional neglect disguised as responding to our personalities. My father looked up from the documents, his eyes red with tears I had rarely seen in my adult life. What do you want from us, Sage? How do we fix this? The question hung in the air, loaded with 28 years of accumulated pain and disappointment. I had spent weeks preparing for this moment, but now that it was here, I felt the weight of deciding whether our family could be salvaged or whether some relationships are too damaged to repair. I want you to take full responsibility for your choices, I said slowly. Not excuses about personalities or adoption practices or thinking you were doing your best. I want you to acknowledge that you created an emotionally abusive family dynamic through deliberate favoritism and deception. I looked at Celestine, who was listening intently. I want you to help Celestine understand that her sense of superiority was artificially created and that she needs to take responsibility for how she has treated me over the years based on that false belief. Finally, I looked back at my parents. And I want you to contact Sarah and apologize for stealing 28 years of relationship with her daughter. Whether she chooses to forgive you is her decision, but she deserves to hear you acknowledge what you took from both of us. My father nodded slowly. And if we do all of that? Is there a chance we can rebuild our relationship? I considered the question carefully. That depends on whether you can learn to love and support both of your daughters equally moving forward. Because I am not going back to being the family disappointment while Celestine gets to be the princess. Either we are all family, or none of us are. The truth was finally out there, raw and unavoidable. Now we would all have to live with the consequences. 6 months have passed since that explosive Christmas morning, and the aftermath has been more transformative than I ever imagined possible. The immediate weeks following my revelation were chaotic and painful, but they ultimately led to the kind of authentic family relationships I had never experienced before. My parents did exactly what I had demanded. They called Sarah and spent over an hour apologizing for their deception, acknowledging the pain they had caused both of us, and asking for her forgiveness. Sarah, with the grace that had drawn me to her from our first conversation, accepted their apology while making it clear that rebuilding trust would take time and consistent action. More importantly, my parents began attending family therapy sessions to understand how their favoritism had damaged both Celestine and me. The process has been uncomfortable for everyone involved, but it has forced them to confront the reality that their parenting choices were not just imperfect but actively harmful. Celestine's transformation has been the most surprising development of all. Learning that her privileged position in our family was completely arbitrary shattered her sense of identity, but it also freed her to become a more authentic and empathetic person. She began therapy individually to process her own feelings about adoption and family dynamics, and she has made genuine efforts to understand and apologize for her role in perpetuating our parents' favoritism. "I realize now that I was cruel to you in ways that I did not even recognize," she told me during one of our weekly phone calls. "I dismissed your achievements because I had been taught that I was naturally more special. I expected you to celebrate my successes while minimizing your own because that was the family dynamic I had learned. But none of that was fair or acceptable." These conversations with Celestine have been healing in ways I never anticipated. We are building a relationship based on mutual respect and genuine interest in each other's lives rather than competing for parental approval. She has even started following my career more closely and has become one of my biggest supporters as I navigate new opportunities in my field. My relationship with Sarah has blossomed into the kind of mother-daughter connection I had always longed for. We talk several times a week, and she has visited me in Portland twice. Meeting her in person felt like looking into a mirror that reflected not just my physical features but my personality, interests, and values. She has introduced me to extended family members who are excited to welcome me into their lives, and I finally understand what it feels like to belong somewhere completely. The most significant change has been in my relationship with my adoptive parents. The therapy sessions have been brutally honest, forcing them to acknowledge that their treatment of me was not just unfair but emotionally abusive. They have had to confront the reality that their favoritism was not based on personality differences but on their own comfort levels and unconscious biases. My mother admitted that she had found it easier to bond with Celestine because Celestine was more openly affectionate and dependent, while she had interpreted my self-reliance as rejection. My father acknowledged that he had expected more from me academically and professionally precisely because I seemed more capable, never considering that his higher expectations came with lower emotional support. These revelations have been painful for all of us, but they have also opened the door to more honest communication. My parents have made concrete changes in how they interact with both Celestine and me. They now ask about my work with genuine interest, celebrate my achievements publicly on social media, and include me in family decisions that they previously made without my input. The financial disparities have also been addressed. My parents established college funds for any future children Celestine and I might have, contributing equally to both accounts as a way of acknowledging their past inequitable treatment. They also made donations to Sarah's scholarship fund, recognizing the irony that she had been supporting young women in technology while they had been undermining their own daughter's achievements in the same field. Perhaps most importantly, they have committed to complete transparency about our family history. They contacted extended family members and friends to explain that both Celestine and I are adopted, correcting years of assumptions and lies. This process was embarrassing for them, but it demonstrated their willingness to take responsibility for their deception publicly rather than just privately. The response from extended family has been overwhelmingly supportive. Many relatives admitted that they had noticed the favoritism over the years but had assumed it was based on personality differences rather than deliberate choices. Several family members have reached out to apologize for not speaking up when they witnessed unfair treatment, acknowledging that they should have advocated for me more consistently. My Aunt Rebecca has become a particular ally, expressing gratitude that the truth finally came to light and offering to help rebuild family relationships based on honesty rather than manipulation. She has also connected with Sarah, and they have developed their own friendship based on their shared love for me. Looking back on this entire experience, I am struck by how much my life has improved since I decided to stop accepting unfair treatment as normal family dynamics. Standing up for myself and demanding accountability was terrifying, but it ultimately led to relationships that are healthier, more authentic, and more supportive than anything I had experienced before. I have learned that family is not just about blood or legal relationships but about people who choose to show up for each other consistently and authentically. Sarah has been more of a mother to me in 6 months than my adoptive parents were in 28 years, not because she gave birth to me but because she sees and values who I actually am. Celestine has become more of a sister to me now that we are building our relationship as equals rather than as competitors for parental approval. And my adoptive parents are slowly learning to be the kind of parents they should have been all along, motivated by accountability rather than entitlement. The hardest lesson has been accepting that some damage cannot be completely undone. 28 years of conditional love and emotional neglect left scars that therapy can help heal but cannot erase entirely. There are moments when I still struggle with feelings of inadequacy or when I catch myself minimizing my achievements to avoid seeming too proud or demanding. But I have also discovered reserves of strength, resilience, and self-advocacy that I never knew I possessed. Fighting for my own worth and demanding better treatment has taught me that I have the power to create the kind of relationships and life experiences I deserve. As I finish sharing this story, I want to ask those of you watching: have you ever experienced family favoritism or discovered that your family dynamics were based on lies or manipulation? How did you handle learning that the people you trusted most had been treating you unfairly? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below because I think many of us have experienced some version of family dysfunction disguised as normal dynamics. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life family drama stories. Share this video with anyone who might need to hear that they deserve better treatment from their families, and remember that standing up for yourself is not selfish, it is necessary. Thank you for listening to my family revenge story, and remember that sometimes the best families are the ones we choose rather than the ones we are given. Life is too short to accept conditional love as the best we can expect.